Some homes I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy. Not because they look bad. In fact, they often look great. They've got a good layout, a nice neighborhood, staged to impress. But underneath, they're financial landmines. And the damage, well, it doesn't show up right away. It tends to creep in after the excitement fades. When life gets busy or the interest rates shift, or you try and sell and you realize that nobody wants what you've got. So I'm talking about things like condos in buildings with hidden pending levies and bad reputations, or townhomes with strata fees rising faster than their value, and detached homes in flood zones or isolated pockets that buyers avoid like the plague. And most buyers, they never see it coming. They get caught up in the moment, the pressure, the fear of missing out. And then a year later, they're trapped in a property that's quietly bleeding them dry. And here's the thing. The warning signs were always there. You just have to know where to look. And so in this compilation video, I'm going to break down the types of homes that I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. Because when that market shifts, and it always does, these are the types of homes that drop the fastest. They take the longest to sell, and you will lose the most money. Thinking about buying a condo in Vancouver? Well, hold on, because there are certain types that you should never touch, no matter how good they look on paper. Some condos, they may seem like a great deal, but lurking behind those walls could be hidden costs, endless repairs, and rules that will drive you up the wall. And so in today's video, I am breaking down exactly which condos to avoid so that you don't end up with surprising fees, a layout that you're going to hate, or regulations that might make you second guess your purchase. And be sure that you stick around until the end, because the last type of condo that I reveal, well, let's just say it's one that surprises most buyers, and it could save you an ungodly amount of stress and frustration. First up, let's talk about older buildings, especially those with poor maintenance records. Now, Vancouver, it has plenty of older condos, and while they may seem like great deals, they often come with hidden issues. A lot of these buildings, they weren't designed to handle our wet climate long term, which means they're prone to problems like leaks, mold, and structural wear. Listen, with older buildings, repairs, they're just part of the package, but what you want to avoid is a place where maintenance has been neglected over the years. So when basic upkeep gets postponed, even minor issues can spiral into major repairs. So things like a new roof, plumbing updates, or electrical work, these are all things you need to be on the lookout for. And if the building's contingency reserve fund, known as the CRF, doesn't have enough in it, those costs usually will be passed on to the owners by way of what's called a special assessment, which, depending on the repairs needed, can easily cost you thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. Now, if you're not familiar with what a CRF is, it's basically a savings account that the strata maintains, and they build it up with a portion of your monthly maintenance fees. Now, the purpose of having these funds set aside is for major repairs and replacements so that owners aren't hit with these huge unexpected costs. Now, here in BC, a healthy CRF, it should be around 25% of the building's annual operating costs or budget, okay? And if the CRF is too low, that is definitely a red flag that the building might not be prepared for big upcoming expenses. So if you're looking at a building, a condo, especially older buildings, review those strata documents very carefully. You want to go back at least 2 years, and ideally more if you can, to see if there are any patterns of postponed repairs or recurring maintenance issues. And you also want to pay very close attention to the CRF balance. It says a lot about the building's financial health, and doing this homework can save you from costly surprises and a lot of hassles down the road. Okay, so next up, let's talk about amenities. Things like pools, gyms, the concierge. It sounds great, right? But here's the catch. Every extra amenity adds to your strata fees. And if you're not using them regularly, you're just draining your wallet. The truth is that many buyers, they get drawn into high-end condos with all of these extras, things like pools, hot tubs, gyms, rooftop patios, you name it. And at first it feels like you're getting into a luxury and you're having luxury at your doorstep. But here's the catch. After that initial excitement wears off, most people realize they barely use any of it. Meanwhile, your strata fees, they're often climbing higher to each and every year just to cover the maintenance and upgrades for each of these amenities. So here's what I'd say: before you buy into a condo with all of these extra perks, just be sure that they're perks that you're going to be using on the regular. Otherwise, you're probably going to want to steer clear. All right, number 3 is condos with poorly designed floor plans. When it comes to floor plans, there are definitely some red flags that you're going to want to avoid. First off, watch out for layouts with awkward angled walls. They might look fine on paper, but in reality, they make it tough to place your furniture, and you're going to end up with all this wasted space that's really hard to use. Also, you're going to want to think twice about units where the bedrooms are side by side, especially if the walls are thin. In that type of a setup, you're going to hear just about everything from the next room, and that's not exactly great for privacy. And here's another big one. You want to avoid units that are too close to the elevator or the exit doorway. And that's because people, they keep different hours, and let's be honest, some people aren't exactly as considerate when it comes to noise levels. Loud conversations while waiting for the elevator, or the constant clanging of that metal door to the stairwell, it can become a real annoyance over time, really chipping away at your peace and quiet. And the trouble is that these issues, they're hard to picture by just looking at the floor plans. And many buyers, they realize these types of things far too late. I actually did a full video covering the types of floor plans that you absolutely want to avoid. So if you want to take a closer look, you can check that out right there. Next up, let's talk a little bit about elevators, because this is one that might not seem like a big deal, but in a high rise, it really is. All too often people, they will unwittingly buy into a high rise condo with only 2 elevators. And then they end up every morning having to be there, finding themselves waiting up to 10 minutes just to get down to the lobby. And then of course on the weekends, there's more people moving in and out or having visitors, and it gets even worse. So eventually the hassle becomes too much, and they end up wanting to move just to escape the constant wait times and that frustration. So ideally for high-rise buildings, you want at least 3 elevators. And think about your lifestyle also. If you're coming and going a lot, or you have pets and they need walks, or they need to go out for regular pees, well, those fewer elevators are going to drive you nuts. It's these seemingly little things that can make a big difference in condo living. All right, here's another really big red flag, and that is condos with unpermitted work or renovations. Let's face it, some owners, they try to cut corners by skipping permits. Maybe it's because they want to save on taxes, or avoid inspections, or just cut down on costs. And I get that, but if you buy into a condo with unpermitted work, you're the one on the hook if something goes wrong, or if the city finds out. So take electrical work as an example. So say the previous owner added some lighting fixtures or rewired part of the unit without a permit. It might look great on the surface, but if the wiring isn't up to code, you could be facing some serious risks. So think electrical shorts or even fire hazards. And here's the kicker. If the strata finds out, they might require you to update the work to meet code and pass inspection. And that usually means hiring a certified electrician and paying for it yourself. And if the city steps in, you could also be looking at fines or having to pull permits after the fact. So that great deal, well, it can quickly turn into an expensive and stressful headache, and also safety and legal issues that you definitely don't want to deal with. All right, let's move on to something that can cause a massive amount of stress if you're not careful, and that is bylaws. Okay, these are the rules that govern condo living, and every building has them. But here's the thing. Some buildings have bylaws that are, well, let's just say a little too restrictive. I've seen so many situations where overly strict bylaws turned into some major frustration for owners. You've got rules that can restrict everything from pets to, what you're allowed on your balcony. Also, some buildings, they don't allow air conditioning units, which can make it very uncomfortable for those south-facing units on those hot summer days. And it doesn't stop there. Some places restrict barbecues or even what kind of decorations that you're allowed to have on your balcony. So, if you have a pet or you enjoy grilling on the balcony or you just want a bit of freedom with your space, you're really going to want to check out those rules very carefully. So make sure that you take a few minutes to read through the bylaws before you buy, because it's way better to know these things up front rather than be surprised later on down the road when you realize you can't do anything about it. All right, I understand that some of these things might sound like deal breakers, but these tips can save you from costly mistakes and some huge headaches. If you're thinking of buying a townhouse in Vancouver, there are some that you definitely want to avoid at all costs. Yes, townhouses can be a great option, but there are hidden issues that can turn your investment into a costly regret very fast. And so today, I'm going to be covering the exact types of townhouses you should never buy. And the last type of townhouse that I'm going to caution you on is a big one, and it catches a lot of buyers by surprise. So make sure you stick around until the end so that you don't end up stuck in a money pit. All right, so let's start off with one of the biggest red flags, and that is poorly managed strata. A lot of people think that by buying a townhouse, they're avoiding the headaches of condo living. But here's the reality. Most townhouses are still part of a strata, which means you're still paying fees and relying on the strata to keep things in order. So imagine this for a second. You buy a townhouse thinking low maintenance. I mean, great, right? But then you find out the strata is underfunded and it can't cover essential repairs. So, things like roof fixes or exterior maintenance. And then suddenly you're hit with a surprise fee because the strata didn't budget properly. And that, my friend, is a rude awakening. So tell me, if you've ever lived in a strata and you've had a similar ugly surprise, go ahead and share it in the comments below for other people to learn from your experiences. And for the rest of you, the best way to avoid finding yourself in a situation like this is to review those strata documents very carefully before you buy. So you want to check the financials, you want to look at the reserve fund or the CRF, and if it's low, it is a major red flag, because a healthy reserve fund shows that the strata is planning for those future repairs. So don't just assume that because it's a townhouse, you're going to be free from strata issues. Strata is still very much in play here. Let's talk about something that a lot of people don't think about, and that is stairs. Townhouses with multiple floors stacked with flights of stairs, they might seem practical at first. You've got the living space on the main level, and then bedrooms are upstairs, and maybe even have a rooftop deck. But here's the reality. Many buyers end up barely using those rooftop decks. So, why is that, you might ask? Well, too many stairs is the reason why. Also think about this. If you're an aging buyer or you're dealing with mobility issues, those stairs can feel like a daily workout that you didn't exactly sign up for. And even if the stairs aren't a problem right now, they might be sooner than you think. And we should also talk a little bit about the layout here, because this is where the real frustration can kick in. In a lot of townhouses, rooftop decks are only accessible by going up multiple flights of stairs and often right through the master bedroom. So, imagine trying to throw a barbecue up there. You're hauling your meat, your drinks, and your supplies all the way up and through your bedroom and out onto the rooftop deck. And if you've got guests, nobody really wants to traipse through your private space. It's an inconvenience that most people are quickly going to realize it just isn't worth it. So when you're considering a townhouse with a rooftop deck, you want to make sure that you take a look at the layout very closely and make sure that the access routes are functional and that you're going to be comfortable with a bit of a trek to enjoy that space. Otherwise, that rooftop deck, it might end up being completely wasted space. Another thing to watch out for is townhouses with shared walls on both sides. And sometimes you even have units that are either above and below you as well. And so you might think that you're getting more privacy with a townhouse, but if you're in a row of tightly packed units with shared walls, it can feel very much or almost exactly like living in an apartment. And let's not forget that in many townhouse complexes, units are positioned on either side of a shared drive. And it's common for these townhouses to have balconies that face directly across from one another. And of course, this means that instead of a private outdoor space, you could be looking straight at your neighbor's balcony and vice versa, which is probably not exactly the privacy that you might have hoped for or had in mind. So if you are buying pre-construction in particular, this is something that you definitely want to consider and make sure that you are comfortable with. Otherwise, you may end up getting to know your neighbors a little better than you might have liked, whether you actually like it or not or want it or not. Now, guys, if privacy is a big deal to you, it's definitely worth considering end units or units with fewer shared walls. These options, they typically give you more natural light, of course, better airflow, and most importantly, more peace and quiet. And a little extra privacy goes a long way in making your home feel that much more like your own personal space. Next up, let's talk about parking, because it is one of those things that can seem minor at first until you're living in with it every day. Some townhouses, they come with only one parking spot or limited guest parking, which can quickly become a hassle if you have more than one vehicle, or for example, if you have lots of friends or family coming over to visit on a regular basis. And if you don't have your own designated parking attached to your unit or close to your unit, even those simple chores like carrying your groceries from your car to your home can become a real pain. The extra time and effort it takes to lug your bags across the parking lot or a shared drive, especially in rainy or snowy weather, can get old really, really fast. So before you commit, ask about the parking situation. Does each unit get its own designated spot? Is there parking on the street that is nearby? Are there any bylaws that restrict parking? These small details can make a big difference in your daily life, especially if you find yourself constantly searching for a parking spot or juggling cars due to certain restrictions. Parking might seem like a small consideration at first, but it's one of those things that's easily overlooked and it's hard to live without. Now let's talk a little bit about amenities, because a lot of townhouses and complexes, they come with shared amenities, things like, pool or a gym, a clubhouse, and those all sound great at first, right? But those all, of course, come with a cost, which is higher strata fees. Amenities, they can sound attractive, especially if you envision yourself using them often. But here's the reality. These amenities, they might sit unused while you still pay hundreds of dollars every month just to maintain them. So if you're not planning to use the pool, the gym, or the clubhouse regularly, look for a complex that just has the essentials. Because while amenities sound nice on paper, they can really drain your budget if you're not using them regularly. So if you're not going to use them regularly, just keep it simple and save yourself on those fees. Next up, you really want to avoid townhouses with outdated or unmaintained exteriors. So, the exterior of a townhouse complex can tell you a lot about how well it's being cared for or not. So if you see things like peeling paint, cracked siding, or unkept landscaping, these could be signs of deferred maintenance, which might, mean costly repairs down the line for you. So you always want to check the condition of the common areas, the landscaping, and the exterior finishes. If these places look run down, that is definitely going to be a red flag for you. An unmaintained exterior can signal bigger issues beneath the surface. And if the strata isn't putting aside funds for its upkeep, you may end up dealing with an expensive repair later on down the road. Also, be on the lookout for townhouses with restrictive rules and bylaws. Every townhouse complex has its own set of rules, but some are overly strict. From paint colors to what you can store on your balcony, the rules can impact your lifestyle more than you might think. So read the bylaws carefully before you buy. Rules on pets, on rentals, or even decor can impact your enjoyment of your property. You want to have a place where you feel at home, not where you're, constantly worried about breaking some sort of a rule. Thinking about buying a house in Vancouver? Well, beware, because some homes here, They might seem like a great deal, but they can turn into financial nightmares faster than you can say hidden cost. Now, there are some types of houses and properties that you should never buy unless, of course, you're ready to pour money into endless repairs and deal with constant stress. And so today I'm going to reveal exactly which types of houses to avoid in order to save you from expensive surprises. And make sure that you stick around until the end, because the last type of house on this list is one that even seasoned buyers often overlook. And it's a trap that can catch anyone off guard. Now, I know that the Vancouver market is as hot as it gets. And of course, every buyer, they want to snag a great deal. And sometimes that excitement can make even experienced buyers overlook some crucial details. But here is the reality. There are certain types of properties that are more trouble than they are actually worth. And these homes, they're often hidden with costly issues, whether it's dangerous old wiring, water damage, or do-it-yourselfer jobs that end up requiring you to have to hire a professional to come in and fix that poor workmanship. And so in this video, I'm going to walk you through the types of houses that tend to look good on paper, but can often turn into absolute money pits. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what type of homes to watch out for, and more importantly, how to avoid making a very costly mistake. So let's start things off with one that's very easy to fall in love with, and that is heritage homes. Now, these beauties, they're totally packed with history, of course. They have unique architecture oftentimes, and all the character that you could possibly hope for. But you don't want to let that charm fool you, because owning one of these could mean that you're signing up for a never-ending list of repairs and expenses. So here's what you're often dealing with these types of homes. These homes, they frequently have original plumbing, and that could mean lead pipes, which of course was very common back in the 1950s, but now they are considered to be a major health hazard. And replacing those pipes, well, you're going to be looking at a huge cost, sometimes to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars. And then, of course, let's not forget about the electrical. Many of these old homes, they have what's called knob and tube wiring, which is not only outdated, but it's also a fire hazard. And fixing that, it could mean another massive hit on your budget. But that's really just the start of it all. Let's not forget about asbestos, which is another very big concern. It can be in the walls, around the pipes, even in the floor tiles. And safe removal of this asbestos is absolutely essential, and it is far from cheap. So, you add that into possibly a crumbling foundation, drafty windows, and constant maintenance. All of these potential issues can add up very, very fast and could literally leave you staring at some very hefty bills in order to just keep your heritage home in proper shape. Next up are homes with structural issues. Now, this one's a real biggie here. Problems with foundation, sagging roofs, or walls that look like they're shifting anyways, these can all mean massive repair bills. And here's the kicker. Oftentimes these issues, they aren't obvious when you're just walking through the house. And so this is going to be where a pro home inspection is going to be worth its weight in gold. You're going to want to watch out for things like large cracks in the foundation, sloping floors, or windows or doors that are sticking, okay? These might seem like minor things, but they can be red flags for foundational issues. And if they're left unchecked, you could be looking at a full foundation replacement, which could easily run you tens of thousands of dollars. And so if you don't already have a trusted home inspector, don't worry about that, okay? I can introduce you to some excellent inspectors who go through every square inch of the property inside and out from top to bottom. So just know that whatever you do, remember that a thorough inspection can make all of the difference in avoiding some very, very costly mistakes. All right, next up, let's talk about flood zones. Now, Vancouver is known for its rain, and if you're in a flood-prone area, you're signing up for potential problems. Flooding can cause major damage to your home's foundation. It can lead to mold issues, and of course, it can spike your insurance premiums. And let's face it, flood insurance is not cheap. For high-risk properties, it can cost you hundreds or even thousands of dollars every year. And if you need a recent reminder of how serious this risk can be, just take a look at the recent floodings that happened in Vancouver. The heavy rain that we had, it completely overwhelmed the drainage systems. It led to widespread damage, evacuations, and costly repairs. And these events, they show just how vulnerable certain areas can be and how quickly flood damage can turn into major financial and emotional burdens for people. So here's what you need to do. Before making an offer, check out Vancouver's floodplain maps, and you can find these online, and they show exactly which areas are at risk. And remember, it's not just about the storms that cause flooding. Heavy rain, melting snow, and even rising water tables can lead to all of this type of trouble as well. So you definitely want to check out those maps before you commit to buying a new home. Okay, now this next one, it's a little bit of a wild card, but you want to look out for homes with poor workmanship. Now, this can happen, of course, in any type of house, whether it's new or old, and it can be especially tricky to spot. There's going to be some homes that are plagued with what I call weekend warrior do-it-yourself projects. So, there's well-meaning do-it-yourselfer jobs that might look great on the surface, but they often need to be redone by a professional to make them safe and functional. When touring a home, you really want to keep an eye open for things like uneven floors, sloppy paint jobs, gaps in the molding, or even crooked cabinetry, because these little signs, they can point to bigger issues behind the scenes. And so think about it. I mean, if they haven't or didn't put the time and care into those basics, what does it say about the work that you can't actually see, the things behind the wall? And here's a real quick tip also. You want to bring a marble with you when you view these homes. Place it on the floor, and if it starts to roll, you're likely dealing with an uneven surface, which is definitely a sign. Also, you want to watch out, especially for quick flip type houses where, there's investors that may have rushed through some of the renovations trying to turn a fast profit. There are some of those flips out there that focus more on the cosmetic fixes than on the solid, lasting, constructional type fixes. So you definitely want to keep a close eye on those details, because catching poor workmanship up front, it can save you a lot of headaches and repair bills down the road. And number 5 are houses in noisy and less desirable locations. Yes, location, location, location. You've heard it before, and it's definitely something that's worth repeating, because even a fantastic home can lose its shine if it's in a poor location. So think about homes near train tracks or, busy highways or industrial zones. They can really struggle to hold their value. And a hard to sell house or hard to sell location can turn into a big headache down the line. So here's my advice on this one. You definitely want to take a drive around the neighborhood and visit at different times of the day, if at all possible, because noise levels and local activity can vary a lot from the morning to the evening. And also be sure to check out the nearby amenities as well. Houses without parks or shops or schools nearby, they may be less attractive to future buyers. And of course, while you're living there, it can also impact your lifestyle as well. All right, the next one, it might seem small, but trust me, it can turn into a massive headache for you. And that is unpermitted work. Unpermitted work is much more common than you might think. And some homers, what they'll do is skip permits to avoid taxes or to sidestep inspections. But if you buy a place with unpermitted work, the city could actually come after you to fix it, and that could mean expensive repairs or even having to tear down parts of your home. So here's what I would suggest you do. You should always ask for the property's permit history. Now, this is something that you and your realtor can check with the city records, and it's going to show you any recent renovations that have been done without permit. And this way, if something doesn't add up, you can either walk away from the deal, or you can have the seller, they can handle it before closing. But just believe me when I say that unpermitted work is something that you definitely want to avoid. It can be really, really messy. Now let's talk about underground oil tanks, which is a surprisingly common issue in older Vancouver homes. So of course, back in the day, oil tanks, they were used for heating, but many of these old homes and these old tanks were never removed, and they were just literally left there underground to rust away. And here's the thing, these tanks, they can be both an environmental and a financial liability. And that's because over time, old oil tanks, they can corrode and leak oil into the soil, which of course not only poses a very serious environmental hazard, but also comes with some very hefty cleanup costs. In fact, if you buy a property with an old leaking oil tank, the responsibility and the bill for the cleanup is often going to fall on you, the buyer. And we're not talking about a small charge here either. Environmental remediation for old oil contamination can cost literally tens of thousands of dollars. So here's what I would suggest you do. You always should check for underground oil tanks when considering buying an older home. And if there is a tank that is found, you want to insist on its safe removal before you purchase. And some cities will even require you to provide documentation that any old oil tanks have been decommissioned. So you definitely want to make sure that you ask your realtor to look into that for you. All right, now I understand that everything that we talked about might sound a little bit harsh, but hey, my job is to help you avoid costly mistakes and instead make smart buying decisions. So I've had 3 buyers all reach out to me in the last 2 weeks, all asking me to help them buy a presale condo. And every time, my answer has been the same. If you're even thinking about buying a presale condo right now, stop, okay? You need to hear this first. And I understand that that might sound a little bit dramatic, but I'm serious here because even with all of the media coverage, the empty towers, the price drops, the stalled projects, I am still getting calls from buyers asking me to help them get into a presale. And every time I tell them the same thing, do not do it. And it's not because I'm trying to scare anyone here, but it's because I've seen how this plays out. And I've watched too many people lose too much money because they didn't get the full picture. And so in this video, I'm going to walk you through why pre-sales are even riskier than most people realize. Also, how developers are still getting buyers to bite even now, and what smart buyers are doing instead to protect their money and come out ahead. Now, this isn't the kind of stuff that they are telling you in the sales center. So before you sign anything, make sure you watch this video through until the end. And by the way, later in the video, I'm going to show you how some buyers are actually getting better deals with less risk and more leverage, all by focusing in a completely different direction. And it's not what most people expect. So I want to start off with a quick story here. I was talking with a client of mine, we'll just call her Sarah, okay? First time buyer, single mom, 2 kids. She had a tight budget. And she did everything right on paper, or at least she did everything she was told to do, right? And she bought a presale condo. It was back in 2022. She locked it in early. She even paid a little bit extra to get that corner unit. And back then, remember, the market was very hot and the sales center was completely packed with buyers. And at that time, the sales rep told her that the value of that condo would go up by the time she moved in. And so she went for it. She bought the condo. And then fast forward to a little bit earlier this year, and the appraisal came in, and it came in for $115,000 below what she agreed to pay. And guess what? Well, the bank would not cover the difference. And it was around that time that she reached out to me in a complete panic. And, literally she was days away from losing that unit and her deposit. Now, sadly, I've seen this before, and it's exactly why I don't recommend pre-sales to most people, because it's not a long-term strategy. It's a speculative bet. So if you're playing that short-term game, the odds are against you. But if you're in it for the long haul, if you've got time in the market, that is where real estate wins. So if you give it enough time, most of that risk is going to fade away. But with pre-sales, it doesn't come with time. They come with pressure, they come with surprises, and they come with false certainty. And, that's why Sarah said to me, she said something that I'll never forget. She said, I just wish that someone had told me that by the time it was finished, that condo might not be worth what I agreed to pay for it. And, that really stuck with me because she's absolutely right. And it's why I tell all of my buyers that agreeing on a price does not protect you from a falling market. And let's face it, the market is always going up and then down and then up. It's all over the place. So let's dig into this just a little bit further because, Sarah's situation, it is not unique. It's not a one-off. Right now in Vancouver, it's common, not rare, for presale condos to appraise for less than what the buyers agreed to pay. And we're talking 5, 10, even 20% in some cases. And in that high-end market, I've even seen shortfalls of $300,000 to $500,000. And here's the problem. When those appraisals come in low, the bank is not going to cover the difference. In other words, that shortfall, that comes out of your pocket in cash. I mean, you can literally see towers sitting empty across Metro Vancouver right now because this isn't just a pricing issue, it's also a demand issue. And a lot of people, they assume that I've already qualified or, I've already put my deposit down. But understand this. Banks reevaluate based on the current market, not what you signed for 2 years ago. And that's where buyers are getting caught off guard. And the thing is that this isn't just about market value. It's also about who's actually in the market. And that brings us to the very next point. A couple of years ago, nearly half of all presale units were being bought by investors. And now, that number has dropped to around 7%. And that shift, it changed everything because, back then, investors, they were soaking up a lot of the inventory. They'd assign contracts, hold units, and then flip them later, right? But now, with higher interest rates, tighter lending, and lower rent yields, those investors, they're all gone. And when the investors pull out, developers are left trying to sell to end users, people who are a lot more cautious. So the result, it's slower sales, more unsold units, and even more downward pressure on prices. And now that investor safety net is gone, the next thing you have to look at is the one detail that most buyers overlook until it's too late. So let's talk about deposits. You see, back in 2022 and 2023, lots of developers were offering 5% deposits, and it made pre-sales look accessible. There was that low barrier of entry, right? But here's the thing. When the market shifts and values drop, small deposits make it easy to walk away. So you've got to imagine this. Your unit's worth, say, $100,000 less than what you paid, and you only put down $50,000. So some buyers, they look at that and they go, you know what? I'm going to cut my losses now. And I've seen listings in Facebook assignment groups where people are literally trying to offload contracts just to avoid completion. So they're not looking for a profit. There's no exit plan, just really damage control. And every time that happens, it pulls appraisals down further, which makes the next round of completions even tougher. But while all that is happening in the presale world, there's a completely different side of the market where buyers are actually winning right now. So if presales are risky, what's the better move? Honestly, it is resale. And here's why. With resale, you can walk into the unit. You can actually see what it is you're buying. And you can also negotiate based on today's values. And of course, you can close in weeks and not years. And most importantly, your appraisal is based on actual recent sales and not on guesswork. And you know what? Right now, I am seeing resale units, especially 2 to 5 years old, they're selling for less than new presale units in the very same neighborhood, all with less risk. You've got more control, faster move-in, and better value. And by the way, if you want to know how to negotiate a better price and terms, you can grab a copy of my buyer's negotiation guide. There's a link in the description box below. It's free, it's quick, and it can literally save you tens of thousands of dollars. Okay, so here's what this all comes down to. Pre-sales, they worked in a different era, right? They made sense when the rates were low, demand was high, and appreciation, it just sort of felt automatic. But this isn't that market anymore. And if you're watching this video, I know that you're looking for something more than just a shiny kitchen and new paint. You're actually looking to make a smart move. You're looking to build your wealth and, of course, to protect your money. And that's what this market rewards. People who slow down, ask questions, and think strategically. And resale, it gives you that leverage. It's going to give you certainty. And right now, it gives you better value too. Now listen, if you're thinking about buying a home in BC and you think it's straightforward, think again, okay? Because most buyers, they don't realize that the system is stacked against them, and they don't realize it until it's too late. So make sure you watch this next video popping up, because it could literally save you tens of thousands of dollars. And of course, if you want to talk more about your specific situation, feel free to reach out. There is a link in the description box below. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.